Hey you guys, it's me Crystal, and today I wanted to talk about the books that I read in January. So I finished 10 stories, so I'm just going to jump into it. So the first story I finished is this one picture book by Peter Glover and illustrated by Teresa Martinez. As I mentioned in the book haul, I had a little tiny bit of issue with it, and that's just because I feel like just because something is for children or a picture book doesn't mean that you don't have to try. I felt like the story was just kind of slapped onto the page, and also it was told from the point of view of the prince, which honestly just really wasn't very interesting. The interesting part of the story is with Odette. The prince doesn't really do anything except run away from his party, and then he meets Odette and of course instantly falls in love with her, and then, you know, saves the day. I just didn't think it was well done. Like I said, the illustrations are fantastic, so there's that. So the next book I finished is Enchanted Magic Spark. This is an anthology of witchy stories with a slight romance angle by 3 different authors. It is part 1 of a 3-part anthology series. The first story was When Demigods Court, and it was about this girl who's the demigoddess of death, and then her match moves next door to her, which is the demigod of fertility. And so they're just kind of balancing each other out, and they were literally die without each other. This is my least favorite story. I read about 2/3 of it and then just read the last page. And so it was kind of like they would hang out and then she'd get mad and run off, and this kept happening over and over again. And you know, no matter how many times he told her that he liked her, which I don't know why, it's like she wasn't satisfied. She wanted him to tell her that he loved her, and I'm like, honey, it's been 2 days, no. And then we had These Roots Run Deep, which is about these 3 sisters, and I think the other 2 sisters' point of view were going to be in the other 2 versions of this anthology, but the first one was with the oldest sister, and the ending was fantastic. I did not see it coming. I did not know what to expect, and it's kind of comedic, but I wasn't expecting it to be comedic, so at first I was just kind of thrown off a little bit, but it was really good. And then the last story was Destiny's Dark Light, about this girl, and she comes from a family of witches, but she doesn't have any witch powers because she hasn't met her soulmate yet. But when she meets her soulmate, he is in love with somebody else. So that story was good, and overall I really liked the anthology. So the next story I read was another picture book, What Do You Do With an Idea, by Kobe Yamada, and illustrated by May Betsam. So I think I mentioned in the book haul, but this was kind of a recommended book for creative types. From that perspective, I didn't really think it was life-changing, but as a picture book, I thought it was fantastic. The illustrations were perfect for the story, and they were cute and whimsical and fun. And it's about this little boy. One day he gets an idea, and his idea takes the shape of this little egg with a crown on it, and as the story progresses he gets bigger. So I thought it was really fun and cute. The next book I finished was 4 Past Midnight by Stephen King. This is a collection of novellas. And total the book is, I think, over 1,000 pages, which means the average story is about 250 pages. So I was reading this book for a little while, so this is my first time reading Stephen King, and I thought the book was fantastic. The first story is The Longliers, and it's told from multiple point of views about these people who they get on this red-eye flight from, I think, somewhere in California to maybe Boston, and they wake up and everybody else in the plane is gone, and it was super creepy. And then until you get to the end, and then it kind of waxed a little ridiculous, but the ridiculousness worked for the story. And so when I finished the story, I was really excited, because I get excited when I read a good book, and so it did work for the story. It did get super weird, which I wasn't expecting. And then the second book is Secret Garden, Secret Window, which was turned into a movie, Secret Window, starring Johnny Depp, and that story was fantastic. It was just like the movie up until the end, only you got more information about his past and all of that, and the story was fabulous. And the next was The Library Policeman. This was creepy, and The Longliers, you get to the end and then all of a sudden it waxes it was super strange, and I was not expecting it. It's kind of a seam of reality just got unzipped, and then all of a sudden all this strangeness is coming out, and you're I don't know if this belongs here, but I'm gonna go along with it because reasons. There were some scenes in this story that were frightening. And there are some scenes in the story that were like really, 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 really dark. I mean, I did see them coming, but it was so dark. And then the last story in this was The Sun Dog. This is about this guy. He gets a Polaroid camera, and it only takes pictures of this black dog. This freaked me out. It did wax a little otherworldly, a little strange at the end. Not as strange as the library policeman in the Longliers, but I was actually kind of grateful when that happened because like I was terrified. Oh no. It was great. It was great. So, the next story I finished is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think I mentioned this already, but I really enjoyed this. I listened to the audiobook. It was very interesting and made me think, and it even actually gave me a couple of things to help me with a couple of futuristic ideas that I have. So, I thought it was great and like highly, highly recommend it if you like any kind of science at all. The next story I finished was Giant Days Volume 5. I've really been enjoying these. They're hilarious, and they're fun, and they're bright. So here are some of the illustrations on the inside, and the way this is written is like each chapter is like a little mini episode, and they're consistent, but like they focus on like a different part of their life with like each chapter, and they've just been a lot of fun. And the next story I finished was Monstrous. So, I did not know what to expect with this. It is really dark. It is so violent and so bloody, and I just wasn't expecting that. And so I didn't love this. For the most part, you know, I found this like confusing. The artwork is beautiful, but it's very, very bloody. And it's like, you know, I watched like the entire run of True Blood, and you think that would have raised my tolerance for blood, but it actually lowered it a little bit. And so since then, I've been a lot more squeamish about like really, really bloody. Like it's so bloody and it's so violent. It's so violent. So I read a review where somebody was praising it because like all the positions of power are like held by women, and it's like, okay, whatever, that's great and everything, but honestly, like I don't care. Like I just want a good story. And I was confused and disturbed. So the next book I finished was Poisoned Apples, a book of fairy tale inspired poetry. Poetry, of course, is always very, very subjective, but I really enjoyed this book. There were some poems that made me laugh, which was unexpected. My favorite poem is called Big Bad Spa Treatment. It was hilarious, and it was dark, and it was fantastic. So I really enjoyed this overall. Of course, there were some poems that I didn't quite get, and some poems that like weren't quite my taste, but overall, I really, really enjoyed this, and I loved it. So the next story I finished is this e-zine called Elfame Realms, Something Witchy This Way Comes. Okay, honestly, I have mixed feelings about this. So I thought it started off really, really good. The stories in the first half of this e-zine were like fantastic. They were so good, and I was reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta step up my writing game, right? But then like all of a sudden the whole thing just like crashed and burned. And the problem I had with the last couple of stories in this was the same problem I had with the Swan Lake picture book, was that I'm like, you can't just slap words on the page. Like I was so upset, like, because like it started off so good and then it was ending so bad. And it's that last story especially, like the idea, the concept for that story is like fantastic. I was like, I want to read a book that's just like all about this story, but the execution was just like so not good. And that's just like not the way I want to end an anthology, on that kind of like sad note. But then as I was writing my review for it, like I remembered like all the stories that I loved, and so that made me feel better. So overall, I really liked it, but I will not be reading the second half of that book again. So there were 10 stories in that book. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just talk about my top 2, and that was Deathless and a story called The Apothecary Shop. Deathless was like, I guess it was kind of like this Russian like folklore or something, and oh my gosh, it was so good. And it took place on Halloween, and this girl was at a party, and she like gets kidnapped by this creature called the Deathless, and then her friend like goes into this world after her, and it was like so good. And then The Apothecary Shop this woman is like having an affair and her husband's like kind of controlling and abusive and she wants to get away from him. It had one of those endings where I was just like screaming at the book, but like in a good way because I was just so excited. So the last story I read was a science fiction short story called The Sun Falls Apart by J.W. Alden. I did buy this book in January, but I didn't mention it in my book haul because I bought it after I filmed the book haul. So it's about this guy and he can't go outside because reasons. And he has this twin brother and their parents are like giving them all these tests and they have to pass each test to get to the next one, and then each test I think it gets a little more questionable as it goes up, and his brother is like doing really well on the test and gets to go outside for the rest of the tests, and he's still stuck on the second one. I don't read a lot of science fiction because I sometimes have a hard time getting into it, but I thought this was fantastic, so I highly recommend it if you like science fiction or if you just like good stories, because it's a short story. But yeah, it was really surprising and really shocking, and I did not expect what was happening like at all, and that's always so much fun. So yeah, so those are all the books that I read this month. And then quickly I want to go through the books that I want to read for next month. I don't normally give myself any kind of TBR, but I wanted to try it out and see if it would like keep me on track or something. The first book I want to finish is Quitter by Jon Acuff. I'm actually already reading this book. I've been reading it for a little while. It is a like non-fiction, I guess like motivational career book or something. It's really good, but it takes me a long time to read nonfiction sometimes. And then while I'm talking about ebooks, the next book I want to read in February is Son of a Witch. This is an anthology also of witchy stories. I think based on the couple of stories I read already that it's kind of like a comedic kind of feel to it, so I want to get that read. And then the next book I am listening to an audiobook, Where Silence Gathers by Kelsey Sutton. So if I finish it, which I should finish it because I'm about halfway through at this point, this will be the first fiction audiobook that I've ever listened to in my life. And then on the physical books, I want to read X-Men Second Coming. I think this started out as an X-Men Avengers crossover, but in any case, this is the final book in like this storyline. And speaking of books with pictures, I want to read Monsters Volume 2 to mostly just see if I like it now that maybe it won't be as confusing, maybe, I don't know. And also I know that it's going to be violent and bloody now, so that won't be such a big surprise. And of course, speaking of graphic novels, I want to read Giant Days Volume 6. And while I'm still on graphic novels, I want to read a manga, Sailor Moon Volume 2. Then I want to read The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. And you know what? I just realized that the text in this book is colored ink. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but it's like teal or something. It's pretty. And then since I'm feeling kind of ambitious, I want to read Paper Princesses by Erin Watt. And I'm very excited about this. So we'll see. And I'll let you guys know what I read at the very end of this month or beginning of next month. So feel free to share your TBR. Let me know if you read any of the books that I talked about in this video. And I will see you guys in another video. Bye.